signatory to the same 1951 convention, the 1967 protocol. We have a 2009 policy dealing with refugee and how to address all of that. When persons come here, Dionne and viewers, our government must ensure that due process again is followed. You're spoken to in a language and so on. But let's look at how they've dealt with the Haitians. The Haitian come here 4 o'clock by midnight, and I always use the example of Melania Lane because I'm literally picturing this brave attorney driving along the winey road in Mr. Buchanan's constituency behind a police vehicle so that she can get access to persons who in our policy says they must have access to lawyers. But in real terms, because we don't have a law dealing with it, what you find happening is that the government, quite frankly, has not necessarily adhered to these policies. So the question we must ask ourselves, are we assured that the government will be adhering to these policies that it has set? Are we assured that when people come here, they will have access to attorneys? What assurance do we really have if it is that we have already not followed the policies that Jamaica has outlined for itself? So the human rights concerns are real because our government can't send back an individual to a country to which they may face possible persecution. That is what you call refoulement. Chain refoulement in this instance, because the US send them because they can't send them back directly. Jamaica, what reassurance we have that we can send back anybody? And if we can't, then the real question is, say the government is going to be adhering to the policies, right? The Minister of National Security said something instructive. They can apply for asylum status. So give the minister the benefit of the doubt. The asylum process will be respected. How many of those 10 at a time will ultimately get permanent stay in the country? And what provisions in the long term will be dealt with? Because in that situation, it's no longer the U.S. government paying for it. It's the Jamaican people through our tax money. And that is the real concern, because if you send them back, you breach the law. If you keep them,
you have to provide for them.
Okay, hold it there to chew on, but we're nearly at the break, so we're just going to take another break, and then we'll come back, we'll continue. We're talking about this third country national agreement between Jamaica and the United States, some of the issues, why people are concerned. Government says we're not to be concerned. We're taking a look at where we are now, and we're back in a moment. Thank you so much for staying with us. We're continuing to talk about the third country national TCN agreement between Jamaica and the United States. So one of the concerns that a lot of people had was where we're going to put them. You know, we're not in a space, all our facilities are overcrowded. How are we going to care and accommodate these people? The Deputy Prime Minister or National Security Minister has said they are not detainees, so they're not going to be in police lockup somewhere or Horizon or whatever. He says the other arrangements, operational details have not yet been ironed out. Isat Buchanan, let me come to you on this.
I'm going to start there because, again, the categories of persons who are coming back, what we hear from the Deputy Prime Minister is that these persons are free to move around. If they seek asylum, they can stay, and then we work out how the money part go. But so far, these TCNs are in transit. The problem that we're facing, though, is the fact that we have the U.S. court saying that a lot of these persons are asylum seekers. I repeat again, we don't have asylum legislation in Jamaica. We have a policy that goes on a case-by-case basis. On Monday of this very week, there were 17 Haitians, 3 of them children, landed on a boat that was destroyed by the health inspectors, and those persons are detained. They're not free to move around. So we have a way in terms of, on a human rights basis, the equitable treatment of persons. And my friend raised it. We have deportees that are coming from America, our own,
or UK.
And this is where I'm conflicted because the treatment is not equitable treatment. And so we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the resources. We are just recovering from a massive disaster and praying that we don't have a second one, and we're taking on things that we cannot manage. The last thing I will say, though, Dionne, is the United Kingdom tried this with Rwanda, and it was an epic fail. The courts would have ruled that in terms of international law, there are certain criteria that a country has to meet to ensure that human rights are not violated, and Jamaica is incapable of meeting them now. And so while we're ironing it out, we have to respect the Constitution, which is the supreme law, and respect due process of every single person, TCN, deportees, and asylum seekers from Haiti or any country, as we think about human rights.
Just an update, the number of Haitians, the last figure.
28.
Yeah, 28.
I just was referring to this week alone, and the fact that the Deputy Prime Minister says, listen, the TCNs are free to move around, but as the Haitian touch land, they're locked up, they're detained right now.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Chang was saying that's not a fair analogy, because he says the Haitian migrants who come here are doing so unlawfully, the third country nationals would be coming under a formal agreement between
No, the third country nationals are unlawfully gone to the United States, and we're not staying there.
Don't go there
We're lawfully.
But
Asylum seekers. Beyond,
are being
standing orders. Standing orders beyond.
What are being landed in Jamaica with the agreement of the Jamaican government.
And that's where the problem lies.
No, but I'm saying really and truly it's not exactly the same thing.
No. We disagree. We disagree. We don't have asylum legislation.
No. I'm saying there is a fact though on which there is not an issue about agreement or disagreement. I'm saying the Haitians are coming without the agreement of the Jamaican government, the immigration authorities. The TCNs are going to be coming with the permission of the Jamaican government. I said that is a fact.
If the Haitians could have if all of them could speak English, what I'm hearing from you and the Deputy Prime Minister is, listen, Haitians, go to America and hope that they send you here so we can treat you better.
Don't equate me with what the Deputy Prime Minister is saying. But I am simply stating a fact.
In terms of the MOU first.
The difference between the MOU and landing on a beach in Mansion Hill. Yeah. I'm saying there is a difference between the two.
Right. And my question was, why is it taking so long? Where other things we can push through Parliament, why is it taking so long? And we know the need, we know the issues with the Haitian. Why is it taking so long for us to have a piece of legislation recognizing the situation of Haitians and ensuring that they can come here and be protected, just as we have an MOU with
the government, to be fair to administrations over the years, we've accepted Haitians before in terms of political crisis, early 2000, I can readily recall. So is that a case where we haven't? Because the policy does make reference to the treaties to which we're a signatory. So even with the absence of legislation, one must ask the question, why the heck do we keep signing treaties if we're going to be disregarding them? Or again, as Isat mentioned earlier, we don't have equity in how we treat people. And that is fundamentally wrong. That is the issue.
Is that, you think, because that in particular seems to have struck a chord with a lot of Jamaicans? They're making that comparison.
And rightfully so.
There's a other side to it there. Because there could be a general rule that we currently, as post-Melissa, can't manage any of it. Can't manage any Haitian, can't manage anybody. Because we have persons who are living in deplorable conditions. We have the government bulldozing spaces. We're having issues about what adverse possession is now squatter and illegal and how we treat them. And we have Jamaicans who just want to live somewhere post-Melissa. Still living in tents, still don't get the roof grant, still don't get these things. Not making it political, but to say that we have to fix ourselves before we take on what we cannot manage. The system is not in place and is in breach of the 1951 Article 33, Article 3, and we just simply can't make it. And I'm saying, had this come to Parliament for review, because remember, Jamaica really can't talk up, they can't size up and broad up them chests to the United States. So I'm not here to behave as if the Prime Minister has a choice in the matter. I'm saying we still have to respect our Constitution is the dawn of all dawns. So we must not breach our own laws, international laws, to pander to what we cannot manage. We have to say these are the terms, and I've taken it to my people, and it's difficult. And also tell the common man that vex right now that, listen, United States say you're going to lose your visa. I'm sure those who stand up at Hope Road will think differently. But tell us what it is that we are facing. What are the penalties? Because we simply cannot manage.
And tell us the cost of it.
We can't manage.
But they've made a point of saying it's going to be 25 at a time. We're not going to have more than 10. After that, if 10 agree to stay, the program ends.
Listen, it's not the program itself ends in its entirety.
Meaning we stop taking in people.
Yes.
So when you look at it that way, you might say at 10 people though.
Yeah, but because the provision has not been clearly articulated, which it ought to have been in Parliament, we have a problem. Because the average Jamaican does not understand the provision.
And I have a different understanding of that you just made reference to. Because my understanding is that not that the program ends and there's a full stop, MOU, finish, complete. What I understand is that the 10 will be processed possibly for the asylum, and then once that process gets underway, then you could continue with another 10. In which case, and there's also a caveat from what I understand is in the MOU, that the government does have the discretion to make certain changes to the current term. Granted, we still don't know what the current terms are, but for those who have viewed it, that's what I understand to be in it, which is problematic. And Dionne, so, the government made mention of some safeguards by way of the Deputy Prime Minister. For example, that people who are seeking, who are the TCNs, will be here for a maximum of 14 days. It doesn't really match up with the 30-day and so on, but 14 days maximum. The question is, if this is true in transit, one would assume that the United States, for example, would have already reached out to these countries, already made provision for other countries to take in the TCNs. So the question is, why 14 days? Because if it's in transit, and you reach out to country A to say, okay, they're passing through Jamaica to get to country A, a plane ticket will really take 14 days to process during R30. You can literally reduce it to 48. Or the MOU should have at the very least said, if the home country is not willing to take back the persons, the US should take them back.
That's not going to happen.
No, it's not in the MOU. We know this.
We don't know what's in the MOU.
MOU.
That never.
And that is the fundamental. No, I agree.
I just want to interject here so we don't lose something. And I raised this in several spaces, including yesterday in Parliament. One of the biggest issues for Jamaicans, is say you could have did ask me,
Yeah.
There's a lot of times that you take stuff out of your mother cupboard and she say, if you did ask, me wouldn't vex. So the Jamaicans are vexed because they don't know. And the common man will say, me not like how that sound. Right. But if you give them conversation, say, oh, I saw it go, then we can move on. Because some will say, oh, we have bigger issues to think about. That can go on. But there are academics, there are intellects, there are persons who have capacity and ability. And had we been given the little discretion and respect, this is not just for parliamentarians. We have a nation with competent people outside. And I just think that had we known what it was and they never just dash it upon us without warning, we wouldn't feel so slighted.
Government might say, though, that's naive. You can't have certain kinds of discussions in the public domain. You have to iron out things first, sort out some basic things, then we come to you and talk to you.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem as if those basic things were sorted out either.
Right.
Well, also, they're sorted out that they're going to take them.
No, it's not only that. I'm saying this is a conversation from last week. If it was so private, it leaked. I know that it leaked. You cannot even get an interview from the person with the information and the security minister. He didn't present himself here today to say, listen, it's much ado about nothing, but it actually is.
Quite frankly, a respectful government would have spoken to the people directly through the Prime Minister. That's what a respectful government of the people of Jamaica would have done. You don't disregard people's view and basically say people now have no sense. That's the essence of what was said. A respectful government will come to the people in a somber tone, a reassuring tone, to tell us that, listen, these are the steps that we have taken. And we can take the hint,
You're talking about Jackson Brown? But you were in Antigua. Sorry, I respect you.
Behave yourself.
I'm sorry.
But yes, these are the real questions, Dionne, and in terms of the specificity of what is going to be in those safeguards, will there be a roster of attorneys that persons can contact to ensure that the due process rights are considered? What exactly will be there? Because to say something exists, it really make no sense if you get somebody who's a foreign speaker, generally a foreigner, who don't know the law, then we go take up the yellow page and just start call people.
Well, that's thought for me. Let me just go on the third country nationals between Jamaica and the United States. I know Dr. Archer was trying to come in.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that one of the things, even though they have not explained, what we do know, because we have examples globally of countries who have received third country national or displaced people. And what we have seen in terms of the data, and this data that has been provided through the UN, you have one concentration of these displaced people in urban spaces that has no capacity to provide for them. The healthcare system, the educational system cannot provide for them. So even if they have not said to us the details of the MOU, we know based on other examples what is likely to happen. Even though the MOU says for X period, we know how the system works in Jamaica. You are not going to get, the legal process will not happen in 14 days. How are we going to provide for these individuals during that course, during that time? And for us, that is why we're saying, come to us and let us know what is happening. Let us know the cost and who will bear the cost. Is it us as taxpayers? Let us know that. And that information has not been provided. And by right, we should be angry, cross, and mad.
What's the point at which you're assuming the U.S. funding will stop?
Well, I'm not assuming any fund because it has not been provided. I don't know if we're getting 10 cents or 10 million.
Okay. Well, we don't know the amount, but again, it was said in the MOU that the U.S. will be picking up the cost of their staying.
Come to us with that. And let us then, and also have our experts tell us if that is enough and how we're going to offset the balance.
Tell me how you all want to see us go forward on this, Mickel Jackson, for you.
The MOU needs to be shared publicly. Let's start there. The operational procedures for us, I think the duration within which persons are here, it needs to be reduced from the 14 days to a shorter period. But we're happy with that. I think the government made some effort with having the cap and the rolling 10 and the 25. And I think we can be heartened by that provision. But when we talk about the access to due process, I think we need to ensure that when people are here, they can genuinely exercise that due process rights by ensuring that we have the roster of attorneys, for example. I know the government said that they're trying to get English speakers for the most part, but if you have persons who speak other foreign languages, we need to ensure beforehand that we have, interpreters. And when we talk about even the housing conditions, it's not enough to say that people will not be detained and they have freedom of movement. If it is that somebody is walking behind me from point A to point B, I don't know how free I am. And the conditions of the housing would be important. So long and short, persons are here, they're in our legal custody. We have to ensure that we respect the Constitution and we do not unwittingly, inadvertently participate in refoulement where we send persons back to home countries where they face persecution risk.
Would there not be an even more stark contrast with the situation with the Haitians if you have this roster of attorneys, as you're describing, established for these third country nationals, whereas in the case of the Haitians, you mentioned Malene and her group Freedom Imaginaries, which, she did speak to me this week and said they're working on training other attorneys who are interested in participating. But all of that is very much, I think, a civil society-led process. Yes. So wouldn't it then be, hold on, how you do this to them?
Not equitable treatment.
Not equitable treatment. I agree, but that brings us to the access. So I was just starting there, but I do believe that even if we do not necessarily get to the refugee legislation right now because of the other obligations of Parliament, I think the policy and what governs that policy needs a little bit more, because if you read the policy says you have access to legal services if you want. You may bring an attorney to the eligibility committee if you want, but it doesn't place an obligation to ensure that the systems are there to ensure accessibility. So I think generally that is something that needs to be done. But what is happening, Malene, God bless her heart, she's watching the news and hear that a Haitian go to a police lockup, they should drive, run gun down there. That shouldn't be. It should be a case where just as though you go anywhere, it says, this is the roster of duty council. You may call them. From what I understand, that doesn't exist right now.
Yeah.
So for me, we have to have as a conditional precedent. I'm starting there. What happened to Ettore? And since then, we have signed an MOU on the 10th of June. And here it is. We have our nationals. Why are they in St. Kitts? Why haven't we had answers for that? So I'm thinking that we have to have a proper review in Parliament. I think they need to get independent legal advice outside of Cabinet. Maybe even the Attorney General, to advise them on the way forward. And simply, if we don't have the system in place, we have to say so. And I know that we don't. Mm-hmm. And so we have to take that. And again, if the independent legal advice simply says that we're in breach of international laws, we have to bring that to the table to the United States. It's not that we don't want to participate. We are incapable. And if we lack the capacity, that has to be said. We can't throw money at problems and then create other problems.
Just clarifying what you said, because the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor to Cabinet. So
no, but
you want a
independent legal advice, yes.
Means outside
of that,
okay.
Right. But of course the Attorney General is going to look at that. Because we don't want, so oftentimes is almost like self-governance. You get the advice and then you don't follow it, and then the same thing. We don't know what the Attorney General says half the time if he gave the advice to say you can't do it, and then they went ahead and do it.
But that wouldn't change with external counsel.
Well,
if they don't want to
they don't do
it.
Well, I think we should get the separate opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it may very well be that they're told in terms of what it is, and then they can't say, well, so and so. I'm just putting it there.
No, I'm just saying that if your thinking is that they may not follow the advice of the attorney.
No, the advice of the attorney, I don't want to say that.
Okay.
Don't do with that today. Rabbit hole.
But for me, I want to ensure that all displaced persons, and whether they are third country national, deportees, persons who have been dispossessed from, disasters, and so that they are, one, guided by our Constitution, because for me, Constitution is sovereign, that we have the necessary legislations and policies in place to ensure access and equal treatment to all. And I'm very disturbed by it, because to know that our Haitian brothers and sisters are said a word, we've been relying on civil society to bring it without going into Parliament, and Parliament saying, whether it's the opposition or a government bench, saying, look, this has come, and as a result, here's the opportunity to fix it with this third country MOU. We're going to ensure that Haitians and everyone treated equal once they are displaced.
I said that yesterday respectfully.
In Parliament.
In Parliament.
and
I defend myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
The thing is, I've actually been a little surprised at the reaction of people to this, because really and truly, a lot of Jamaicans don't mind that the Haitians are being sent back. That's the reality.
That's because we don't know our history.
Well, that's a whole other story.
So again, which is an issue where, but there's an issue where there are persons who say we don't want nothing because we cannot afford it and we can't manage it.
And to be
so
fair,
to
be fair, in the unfortunate statement, I remember being in Bahamas, and Haitians, including children, were just being rounded up in buses.
Sad.
So it's a Caribbean thing, and then so it's unfortunate, first free black country, and this is how we treat them. But I think beyond the humanity that I would hope that we develop more as a people, long and short is that our government still has obligations that it must adhere to.
Yeah. I must say this, I don't want to leave it hanging, if you will permit me there. The stigma that comes with deportation, the way as a nation we stigmatize and we treat people is something that we must not forget, that many of us have gone to countries and are being mistreated. And there's some compassion and empathy that has to come across the board from a human rights plane. So I don't want to leave it hanging for anybody, and I will declare here that I've dealt with the stigma of deportation, and wherever they are, I know how they feel. So I'll speak for whether you end up in Estawani, wherever that is on the, you see the Eswatini, or in a place where you never imagined you would be when you went seeking a better life. Which is quite a
distance from Jamaica.
But you went there seeking for a better life, Dionne, and just as a nation, we have to have compassion and empathy. Wherever that falls, we need to rethink that
we signed
as a nation.
The international accord, the human rights accord. So we have adopted it. We just now need the legislations and the policy to ensure that equal treatment for all.
I'll take that.
All right. Gonna leave it on that note. Thanks so much to our guests.